Okay, our next story is equally epic in some respects. We're talking about something that is drawing, well, actually redrawing in some respects the landscape of Britain, and that has in recent days floated to the top of the press's attention due to the first huge chunks of work occurring around the so-called HS2 uh,
Yes.
high-speed train link between London and Birmingham. This has been dubbed and touted for the past couple of years as well. The opinions range. Some people suggest that this is going to be the biggest archaeological project of its kind ever. Other people say this is more or less going to be the lifeline for British archaeology in the next 2 years. It's going to be recruiting and requiring lots and lots of archaeologists, not only from within the UK but also from around the world. We know of some people who are planning on maybe moving to Britain to take part in this dig,
We do.
and I'll comment on that in a bit. But I am fascinated by the fact that the PR is this is part of the PR for the project in some respects. That's what it feels like anyway. By highlighting the scale of the archaeology, you're able to show progress for the project, but also highlight the scale of the ambition, as it were, of the project. That certainly the people behind it want the public to grasp. And in this instance, the initial archaeology involves the movement of 40,000 graves from a site uh, uh, in London, is it presumably? I mean, I'm actually I've had a bit of trouble tying down precisely where this particular site is. Is it anywhere near you?
No, HS2 is in happening in northwest London,
Okay.
so it's exactly the opposite side of the city to where I'm sitting now.
Hmm.
I think it is very interesting, and we've seen this before with large-scale infrastructure projects.
Mm.
Terminal 4 at Heathrow was a major archaeological project, and again, they put a lot of money into it and a lot of money into the PR for it, and it was done by a consortium of major archaeological contractors because it was so big. Same thing's happening with HS2.
Mm.
And to give you some a list of, it will give our viewers an idea of some of the sites that are being investigated that they're publicising that they're investigating. We've got St James's Burial Ground, which is a Victorian and Georgian burial ground. We've got prehistoric settlements in the Colne Valley. We've got a Romano-British town. We've got the Bronze Age land boundary called Grim's Ditch, which is cut by HS2. We've got the battlefield at Edgecote.
Hmm.
Moving further north, more Romano-British settlements at Doddles Shaw and Offchurch. We've got Coleshill Manor, which is a medieval manor house. And then moving finally up to Birmingham, they've got the 18th century Baptist house on the route, and also another burial ground, which gives a cross-section of the population of Birmingham as Birmingham was expanding during the Industrial Revolution and becoming Britain's second city, basically.
Mm.
So, you know,
So
and
rather cunningly, I suspect the very well paid PR people have deemed this to be a timeline, quite literally,
absolutely.
cutting a sway through to the English countryside and also townscapes. And incidentally, that the finally managed to tie it down. Those 40 to 45,000 burials are near Euston Station.
That's
So it's part of
that's
part of the expansion of Euston Station. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Now, obviously, they will be treated properly according to law, but not all of those burials will be removed fully archaeologically and treated forensically. I think
Mm.
it's a controversial area of modern development, but we've already had other examples of large Victorian burial grounds that have been cut by infrastructure projects where specialist grave removal companies come in and do the work, not archaeological contractors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a
So,
mix. It's
so
a mix.
they'll be sampling, I suppose.
There'll be
Yeah,
sampling.
yeah,
There'll be a mixed picture.
yeah.
To be honest, I haven't seen the full project design, so it's not fair to draw too many
Conclusion.
conclusions. I think it's worth adding a caveat, and I think we need to add a caveat to all of this. This is how HS2 present the story. They say, and I'm quoting directly from their page announcing the archaeological project on the HS2 .org website.
Hmm.
And a lot of the press have picked this up more or less uncritically. And it says, exploring our past, preparing for the future. Over the next 2 years, more than 1,000 archaeologists, specialist scientists, and conservators will be exploring and recording over 60 archaeological sites for the project as part of HS2's enabling works. They will reveal over 10,000 years of British history. Their work will range from the prehistoric period through Roman Britain and the Anglo-Saxon and medieval ages, the Industrial Revolution, to World War II. HS2's archaeology programme is Europe's biggest dig and promises to provide a fascinating insight into the everyday lives of the people and the communities who made modern Britain. That's all absolutely fine. That's all absolutely fair. And this is it's a legal requirement that they do this work under the National Planning Policy Framework and other legislation. So great that they're putting it front and centre like this. However, we also have to say that the site HS2 is extremely controversial. There are arguments that this is just part of the greenwash project, which also includes taking people out of cars and putting them onto trains and so on. People argue again that it's a 1970s project going into the future because of the way the world of work is changing with technology and so on.
Well, and it's very similar in tone to the old intercity trains. This kind of idea that, as you say, very 1970s, when increasingly not only are people being discouraged from necessarily travelling too far to work, but also people are able to do work more remotely using internet connections.
As we're doing right now.
Well, yeah, and indeed, on a national level, there has been arguments prior to this project getting the go-ahead that maybe we should be, as a nation, investing, for example, in increasing our broadband access and, well, frankly, fibre optic access to the internet.
Yeah, particularly in rural areas, which HS2 is going to be cutting through large swathes of countryside north of London, between London and Birmingham. The other controversial aspects of the project include criticism that it's being done on the cheap, in that early designs included much more tunnelling, which would have necessitated less archaeology because it would have been less destructive. But those ideas were cut from the project, apparently on cost grounds, it would appear. And underlying it all is the idea that, is this massive effort really worth it to get to Birmingham 20 minutes faster?
Yeah, 20 minutes.
I may be exaggerating slightly, but
it is a matter of, it's not like hours. It is.
No,
it's less, and it's less than. I think it's less than half an hour. It's about 20 minutes. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So,
and there's already a very efficient train service on that line. The criticisms about it actually are that it's overcrowded because there are too many people want to use it because it's so useful, and also actually that it costs too much because of under our current railway system. It's priced more like airline tickets.
So people have been suggesting that maybe again another way of spending the money could be to buy more trains, better trains, newer trains, not necessarily redo this whole line. But and this other angle that I just want to return to briefly, of this being crucial for the future of British archaeology and the character, I suppose, one suspects, of how archaeology will be presented and therefore treated in the years to come. This is going to be undeniably a top tier, public, viewable archaeological project. But I can't help but feel slightly cynical about lots of what feel like tacit promises, more or less, to the archaeological community, which are being made by people who will not really be affected by the work which is done in this project, or indeed the outcome of this project. It is used, or it has been used in recent years as a catch-all. Just over the hill, don't worry, when we get there, that'll be the land of milk and honey. And I wonder, do you think, or can we tell at this stage whether that will be the case? Because there have been other big building projects, civil engineering projects in Britain before, which have required a big influx of archaeologists, and they have had an effect on the community, archaeological community, but also For example, I have friends who go, "Oh yes, I remember when there was the big, building works in, I was involved in that thing in London." It does it, the Olympic Park, for example.
Yeah.
It does bring an influx of work. But is this going to be a great revival of of the digging archaeologist in Britain and their status in, as it were,
Uh,
in society almost?
that's a very, very good question. There are a number of storm petrels, if you like, giving some warnings as to what may actually happen. I think
Hmm.
one of them happened just yesterday when the immigration minister appeared in front of a parliamentary select committee and said that from next March, the end of next March, if there's no final deal with the European Union, employers will have to carry out status checks on employees to see if they've got a right to work. Now,
Hmm.
one of the arguments about HS2 and other big infrastructure projects, we could be facing three simultaneous infrastructure projects, all of which will have massive archaeological demands.
Hmm.
HS2, which has just started, the fourth runway at Heathrow, if that goes ahead in the early 2020s, and also the Stonehenge A303 upgrade, if it happens, and if it happens in whatever form it happens, there'll be a lot of archaeology there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and we already don't have enough UK archaeologists to fill the spaces.
Well, but there is an irony there, in so much as we just haven't employed them for a long time.
Well,
In this country, there is a not even a dearth. Sorry, there is an overwhelming number of trained archaeologists who went through university degree system in particular, have the skills on paper at least, but haven't been able to get adequate training in some cases to keep a digging job because it's one of those catch-22 situations. You need the experience in order to get the employment, but also as well they've
and the
ended up.
CSC card,
Sorry, and what? Sorry.
and the card that you need to be able to work on a development site under
Yeah,
building regulations.
yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah. And those people, thousands of people, have fallen into other professions,
Yes,
teaching, being a lawyer. I know one person. I mean, they're doing much better than me
absolutely,
monetarily, without a doubt. But the point
absolutely.
is, actually, uh, people are saying, "Oh, there's going to be a call for more archaeologists than ever before." The problem is we haven't treated archaeologists well enough so far. And what happens when all those archaeologists are brought in? Are they going to just fall off a cliff at the end of this project? That's what concerns me. Genuinely, as someone, as an advocate for the archaeological community and for best practice and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
it feels a little bit like
I
this is not the cow that will never dry up, if you see what I mean.
No, no. I think that there are a number of things in play. All the issues that you've quite rightly raised are in play, but there are also issues around current numbers and so on. There is everybody knows there's a huge churn, what's called a churn in the profession. People coming in, people staying for a short period and then going out for whatever reason. Um, Everybody, I think, is aware that really there isn't. We've never built up an effective career structure
No, no.
in UK archaeology.
Mm.
Uh, it's
Or a way to keep numbers at a certain level,
That's right.
even when work isn't coming in the door every day. For example, I'm reminded of Weta Workshop. It's a Hollywood production company based in New Zealand. I say
Indeed,
Hollywood, yeah.
special effects team that behind Lord of the Rings and
Lord of the
so on.
Rings and Master and Commander and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Um, and what they do between big projects is they let their team, from top to bottom, management and right down to the people who are frankly sweeping the floor for experience, they all get to work on their own little projects. They maybe swap. They go to different departments. They learn new skills. Everyone keeps a level of employment. It's not always fat levels of pay, as it were, but it limits that effect of feast and famine. And it feels
Yes.
as though we've been through, and I certainly graduated into, a tremendous tremendous famine, that on I say industrial action kind of level, on a sectoral level, there was no answer to. And archaeologists, people, for example, from CIFA even, weren't able to control this in any way. And I just fear what it's all well and good pointing to the great thing that's happening now, but I wonder what that means next, because I don't want to see archaeologists falling out of their jobs again. I also don't necessarily want to see people now being encouraged to go and train for something which in 4, 5, 6 years time won't be there when they come out of their, if they do a master's to get that particular type of work. We need to possibly have a slightly more middle to long term view, and I wonder, especially in the context of the past couple of months of news surrounding, for example, migration issues and the status of planning, for example, around Bosworth Field and Stonehenge. I wonder if we're actually setting those people also up to fall at some point, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, and we're going to be covering this in a London context in a minute when we discuss the London Archaeologists Conference.
I mean, so I don't mean to be asking you impossible questions.
No.
It's more just that this is what I'm really concerned about.
Yeah, no, it's not an impossible question. It's a very important question. I think a thought maybe to leave our viewer with and on this, and as we move on, and I say we will be discussing related issues in a minute on under another topic heading. But the thesis might be that in the 1980s, the bulk of archaeologists took the decision or accepted the decision that most archaeology will be done on a commercial basis by contracting units. And there was a and that coincided with the government ideology, prevailing government ideology, which removed state funding from heritage as far as was possible. And in fact, as is going to be once English heritage becomes self-supporting as it's supposed to be, if that happens, if that works in the way that it's designed to be, almost entirely. And by accepting that, you also accept that the profession is going to be affected by the cyclical nature of the economy. And if you have a boom and bust economy, archaeology will boom and archaeology will bust.
Well, and in that sense, that's very similar to, for example, the building trade. And,
exactly.
Land management that comes with that sort of thing, and yeah.
Absolutely. And so unless you are going to maintain a core level of numbers and skills by investing centrally in archaeology of whatever kind, whether when there isn't an HS2 to do, a core number of archaeologists are employed to deliver community projects or whatever, or to deliver research-based projects, professionally dug research-based projects, rather than that being done through.
Well, and also, God forbid, maybe they should be framed in the same way that you frame, or that government frames, the building of infrastructure. This idea of, well, we're building this bridge because it's good for the people who are going to, this is going to make jobs.
We're building HS2 because it's good to get to Birmingham 20 minutes faster.
Well, yeah, but I suppose what I'm saying,
HS2 is an ideological project. It was done. It was done for. It came about under the Labour government for political reasons, and it was seen as a way of driving the economy of the West Midlands and further north. By making it easier to communicate with London. The argument is actually what it will do is suck people from further out into London, which is another criticism of the. In the end, it is what it is, but it's very much. I wouldn't want to draw too many analogies with building the autobahns in Germany, but it's that kind of idea, tying the country together. And it's a massive amount of government money has gone into it.
Which I can't. Especially at the moment, I can't say is a bad thing. It is providing work and jobs, and
indeed,
but it is just that element of planning for those leaner times.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that on a senior level, whether it's in historic England or whether it's in government or whether it's in some of the bodies more directly connected with professional archaeologists, that people actually think about the lean times. They boast about the fat times that are to come, and then they go, oh, we've fallen off a cliff. Let's do it. We'll gather data. We'll talk about how many jobs have been lost, and we'll talk about mental health issues and that sort of stuff. But I would much rather see some sort of project actually put in place to help us, as it were, as a sector, move through and beyond and between these different big projects in a way that means that people aren't living paycheck to paycheck, and also that this sort of project isn't being consumed so ravenously by archaeologists. The reason why so many archaeologists are so excited is because, I mean, I don't know if you've probably never read this comic, but there's a Marvel series of Marvel comics which is zombies. Basically, the idea is that all these superheroes have become zombies, and they because they're super powered, they've consumed the entire human race, and there's nothing on Earth left to eat. So when something turns up, they just go, they eat it, and then they're hungry again, and they eat it, and then they're hungry again, then they eat it, and then they're hungry again. And I'm not saying that I have an answer. And the thing is, though, it's not my job to have an answer. I'd just like to see those people whose job it could be to have an answer consider what comes next. What happens when the cow does dry up? And I just don't want to see, frankly, I don't want to see other archaeologists going through what so many people in my particular generation of archaeologists, that is, went through 10, 15 years ago, you know?
I think so. I mean, again, just very quickly, and as we finish up this particular package, this particular segment, I think two things are interesting about this, or two observations I would make about this, rather, just to finish. One is that archaeologists have not been encouraged to think strategically. We've been, and certainly that there's.
You might say we think about the past and not the future.
You might say that, and I couldn't possibly comment. No, I could comment actually. No, I think there's a strong element of that.
Yeah.
And the people that do think about the future tend to be outside of the current structures, because thinking about the future, thinking about sustainability, talking about investment and so on, if you're involved in the structures that are delivering this stuff, it's actually very difficult. You're in a climate which is very much directed and controlled by government priorities, and even with the government saying that the age of austerity is coming to an end. Well, actually, no. The discretionary spend is still being cut back and cut back and cut back. There's been marginal investment in schools and the health service in the last few days, but in the current budget. But there isn't the strategic thinking going on, or at least there isn't the strategic thinking going on that has any chance really of coming into practice.